Good morning. I'd like to start with the requisite small fuzzy baby animal because it's the law. But what I want to talk about is art, science, and math. And I want to talk about three people who are involved in all of this. Three friends who went to university together, and one of them decided to study art, and one of them decided to study sociology, and one of them decided to study mathematics. And they had a great time. Their first year was just terrific. They got along really well, and then eventually the two started to kind of move away from the math guy because they talked about sociology and art and people and influence and persuasion. And the math guy, he just sort of talked about math. So they got further apart. And when it was time to move on to business, the artist became a designer, the sociologist became a researcher, and the mathematician became a digital analyst, at which time they sort of lost track of him altogether. Because they started a company, and it was great. They started a design and development company, and they started getting clients, which was terrific, and they started using, shop photos that they got on stock websites, which was not so great. But when they got new clients, it was terrific. And when they really connected with what their users wanted, it was awesome. And when they had a new design, it was wonderful. And they put the design in front of actual users, and there were some problems. Because they realized users are idiots. And of course, their clients were not too happy about all of this. Some of them were actually quite vicious about it. So they wondered, what can we do? And the lesson they took away was that you are not the target audience. You cannot build a website, you cannot build an app, you cannot build a user experience for you. It has to be for users. And the way they've been going about researching their users has a problem. So they decided to try to figure it out. And of course, the best way to do that is go out for beers. And while they're out having beers, they come across their old friend, the digital analyst. And they say, oh, it's so great that you're here. We're curious if maybe you can help us with this problem. We'd like to know, if you have any insights into why we're having this problem with our users. Said, sure, it's this combination. We need qualitative and quantitative. See, you guys do all of the focus groups and the usability lab and the paper prototypes and the card sorting, and that's great. And then you do surveys, and you ask people how they feel and what do they think and what do they usually do, and that's great. The only problem is that people will lie to you. They will tell you what they think you want to hear. They will tell you what they think of themselves. They will make stuff up just to make you happy. That doesn't work. It's a problem. So what we need is to get the quantitative data. We need to know what they actually do. What do they click on? How often do they come back? How many pages do they look at? What do they tell their friends? How do they interact? Really, now I understand, yes, this is looking in the rearview mirror, fine. But it's really informative. It is the quantitative side, which is what I do. Quantitative and qualitative together gets to user experience because that's the most important driver of business. So we need to get the digital stuff involved. And that is what digital analytics is. That's why I'm a member of the Digital Analytics Association. That was a plug, by the way, for the digital. Okay. So they're talking about this and they say, well, that sounds great, but could you just sort of tell us what it is you really do all day so that we can understand how you can help us? Sure, buy me another beer, let's get to it. And as the sun went down, he started to describe what it is that a digital analyst does for a living. And the first thing is understand the raw material. Now, in this case, the raw material is data. And understanding data means knowing where it comes from and how useful it might be. So if it's transactional data, great, that's about 98%, I can trust that. The reliability is very high. If it's social media sentiment analysis, maybe a 67, 65% validity, which is useful, but you can't put those two together and expect them to be right even. So We have to do weighting of what's the value of this different data, and is it timely, and is it kept up to date, and was it correctly collected? I can speak English, it's true. And then I start getting all these data sets. So the first data set I'm used to is web analytics data. Click-throughs, page views, time on site, repeat visits, all that standard stuff. But then I've also got what's happening out in the advertising ecosphere. When you come to a website, this is the National Football League as an example, they kick off a bunch of tags, and the cookie data from that gets spread out across the universe to through Adobe Tag Manager to Rubicon and DoubleClick and Media Math and. So the people who come to a website, data about them just goes whoosh, and gets sold to other people. Like a digital analyst who can buy this data along with data that I can buy from third parties who are collecting it offline. So there are a bunch of companies that are, including these guys, who are keeping track of what's going on and measuring what do you subscribe to, what television shows do you watch, what do you buy, how often do you go to the movies. That's available. So here's an example, just Axiom alone. 1,500 attributes. Do you own a car? How many children do you have? What is your debt level on your credit card? 1,500 different attributes, about 500 million people, which is essentially the population of Poland times 13. 3,500 propensities. A propensity is a predictive analytics model that determines how likely you are to buy a bicycle or a phone or a car or go out to a restaurant. 3,500 different ones. And 90% of those are connected to your social media. They know a lot. And I can buy that. So that's available. And then I can go out and take a look at who your social network is. Who do you talk to? Who influences whom? Who retweets whom? Do you not just follow, but do you also follow the advice of? And do you then go and buy something? So that's available to me. Oh, and then, yeah, my heart rate and my personal drone. And I'm wearing a fitness wristband, so you know heart rate, steps, and how many times I go up and down stairs. You know how I brush my teeth and what my thermostat is set at. All of this together is a great deal of data. And here's where something weird happened. I'm used to doing demographics. Where do you live? What's your income? How many kids do you have? Psychographic. What do you read? What do you watch? What games do you play? Do you respond to catalogs? Where are you in the socioeconomic strata and geography? Customer relationship management data, Salesforce automation data, and call center interactions. This stuff is really straightforward. It goes into a relational database. It is rows and columns. Great. Until this thing happened called the internet, and suddenly the web data, the social data, the data that I can buy, it's not structured anymore. It's a bit of a problem. So I have to have a different tool set to figure out how to work with this stuff. And that's where the term big data came from. My job is to take the information from all of the data silos. If you search, if you come out on the web, if you come to my website, if you're doing mobile or retail or call center, this is comparing apples to oranges. And all of these data sets are collected in a different way and stored in a different way. So my job is to extract the data out of these different silos and transform them into some sort of mechanism whereby they can all work together. And then that can go into a big data warehouse that lives in the cloud that's accessible from everywhere. And at that point, the two buddies said, okay, you just totally won buzzword bingo. What are you talking about really? Well, let me do an analogy. Maybe this will help. This is the raw material I'm used to working with. I'm accustomed to working with. This is the result that I would like to get. This is my inspiration. And when I come to work in the morning, this is what I have to deal with. So the tools that I brought aren't going to cut it. I have to bring in the heavy machinery to really make this work. That's what big data tools are about. They're a whole different kind of tool set. And that's where I have to start understanding the technology. So I understand data, but now I have to understand the technology as well. And the tool sets are not simplistic. It's going to take some work, and they're changing all the time. It's tough. And the result is really ugly and pretty useless, actually. As a report, reports are pretty useless unless I really understand the problem we're trying to solve. So this is where the data, the technology, the most important thing is, what is the organization trying to accomplish? 3 rules, 3 things that I need to do only for business. Make more, spend less, make my customers happy. That's it. Everything else serves that. And if I look at marketing, another layer down, I go, okay, I want them to know who I am. I want them to like who I am. I want them to tell their friends. I want them to interact and purchase, and then tell their friends to purchase. Great, so those are the goals, and then I've got these proxies that identify whether or not these things are happening. Did you click, did you tweet, did you comment, did you interact with the brand somehow? Those are the metrics that I use, those are the goals. So I've got data, I've got tools for manipulating them. I understand what the problem is, and now I actually have to do some work. This was all just getting ready. The work I do is analysis. And this is where we have to understand who the players are. I have my data scientist here, Dilbert. I have my insights consumer over there, Don Draper. And there is a gap in the middle because a report doesn't help Don. The numbers don't help Don. Insight does. This is what Dilbert does, the mechanics. Collect, clean, store, manage. This stuff is the exciting stuff. This is the creative side. I have to look at all of this data and say, ooh, what does it mean? So I need somebody who can look at data and see something. I need a data detective. I need somebody who can look at this stuff and see it in 3D. And tell me not what is the data, but why do I care? What's the important part? What does it matter? As a data management, a data strategist, a data analyst, if I look at the data, and if I look at the data only, I can create Mona Lisa in a paint-by-number manner. This is not going to stir anybody's emotion. This is not going to get into a museum anywhere. But if I try to do painting and design without some science, I'm not going to make it because there is some science that gets involved in what makes a good composition. So the data person has to be left brain and right brain. The data person has to be intuitive. The data person has to be creative. So let me give you another analogy. Data, individual bits, by themselves, beautiful, fascinating. I can find a world in a grain of sand. The problem is that when I get to work in the morning, this is what I have to work with. My job is to determine what direction are the dunes going, what do the ripples mean, and it's too much. I can't. I don't know. So I do a little trick. It's called building a model. I use the data to build a mathematical model of the reality. It's not reality. It's a model of reality, and it can be fairly complex, although simple is better. But above all, it's important to remember that all models are wrong. Some models are useful. Every model is an interpretation of the data. If it's a little bit better than guessing, then it's useful. But it's not ever exact, it's not ever accurate, it's not ever perfect, and it has a limited time value because eventually things change. The marketplace changes, the times change, the competition changes. It's payday this week, there was a big storm last week, everything changes. So models we have to be very careful with. So being a digital analyst is not about giving you reports and having specific answers and telling you what the numbers are. It's asking really good questions about what you're trying to accomplish and asking really good questions of the data. So when I understand that, when I understand the data, the tools, when I know what problem we're trying to be solved, and I'm good at analysis, my job's not over because I have to be able to communicate that out to the rest of the world. I need to be able to not deliver reports. I need to be able to tell a story. So, let me tell you a story. Your brain just switched gears. You were following along and listening and translating and thinking, okay, that makes sense. I don't know what he means there. Yeah, that's okay, that's good. And when I tell you that I'm going to tell you a story, you go, okay, good. There's going to be a person who has a goal, and there's a problem, and there's a solution, and I will learn something. And that's how the brain is wired. So if a digital analyst comes up to you and says, here's the numbers, run the other way. When the digital analyst says, well, let me tell you a story, good, okay. If they tell you exactly how hard it was to collect the data and how difficult and how complex it is, go the other way. You don't want to know how a sausage is made. If they tie it to the bottom line, make more, spend less, make customers happy, yes. If an analyst is really good at their job, they know what you as an individual are trying to accomplish. I want to hire more people. I want to win an award. I want to just do my job and have people leave me alone. And if you understand what those goals are, you can use the numbers to help them achieve their personal goals. You will have an asset in the industry. But above all, it's about having an opinion based on the data. It's about knowing what the data means and communicating it well. I believe that we can increase sales by 12% in 3 months if we do this, and we have a way we can test it. That's magic. That's using data the right way. That's how it all works. Finally, corporate culture. Numbers, everybody thinks of them as accounting, and that's not what digital analysts do. We deal in statistics. It's probability, it's likelihood, it's gambling. We are more likely to make money this way than that way. It seems, the data suggests, it's not accounting, it's not specific. You have to get really comfortable with fuzzy numbers. Altogether, that's how it works. What do you guys think? They said, fuzzy numbers, yeah, well, that's not the only thing fuzzy because we've been here all night. And do you think you could just summarize that for us? Sure, and as the sun came up, he said, look, it's very simple. Big data is just more data than you're used to. That's all you have to know. Analytics doesn't mean anything unless you have specific goals. Creativity is absolutely necessary in a digital analyst. All models are wrong. Some models are useful. Communication is absolutely necessary, and you've got to get really comfortable with the fuzzy numbers. Does that make sense? And they said, wow, it really does, and we think you could help us. Would you come work with us? And he said, that'd be great. I'd love to be working with you guys after we split up in college. And once they did, their clients were like, oh yeah, this is gonna work. It's happening. We can make this. And the analyst said, I get recognition? Yes. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.